cops or law enforcement officers are an extremely crucial part of the society. While every country wants its security personnel to be at the top, there is so much more than just guns and weapons that go on to maintain it. The hierarchy of security is complex, and there are multiple levels to it as well. However, police officers can be considered as the frontline warriors within this sector. They are the ones who are in closest proximity to everyday citizens and who are the most aware of any criminal activity that is on the rise. While there have been several reforms to make it better for the public to feel safe and secure, loopholes are no new thing to this system as well. Unlike any other sector, there are good cops and bad cops. While this can be based on multiple factors, some have made it to the top of the list of committing atrocities of another level. Their conduct of certain activities took away their stature and the once respected image they had as a cop. On countless occasions, there have been officers who went rogue to get back at their department, or the whole police force as well. While there have been other accounts of seniors assaulting their juniors for something they did not even do. Getting a complaint every now and then is not a big deal. But what about offenses that cross the boundaries of humanity itself? Brace yourselves, as some corrupt cops were killed in a courtroom for unlawful activities. 1. Christopher Jordan Dorner. Promotions and terminations are part and parcel of the police life. However, unlike any other corporate situation, the juniors often find themselves being chased by seniors, just as a cat does to a mouse before ultimately devouring it. Similar was the case with Christopher Jordan Dorner. The LAPD Los Angeles Police Department officer was supposedly fired in 2008. Since then, Dorner took it upon himself to claim his name back, as according to him, he went through significant mental stress while serving in the LAPD. Countless labels put by Dorner on the LAPD include those of racism and corruption within the department. When he ran out of options to sort it out the ethical way, he went on a murderous rampage to extract revenge and recover his lost name and identity stolen by the LAPD. Dorner was fired as a result of making a false complaint against his training officer, Sergeant Teresa Evans. Dorner accused him of using excessive force against a mentally ill patient. When the matter was investigated, it turned out that Dorner passed on false information, putting the training officer and department in jeopardy, resulting in him being fired from his post. Dorner went live when he posted a manifesto on February 3, 2013, where he gave descriptions of what he has been through and marked the targets he would assassinate within the LAPD. His first victims were Monica Kwan and Keith Lawrence in Irvine, California. Monica was the daughter of Randall Kwan, a former LAPD captain and lawyer who represented Dorner during his dismissal hearings. The next murder took place in Riverside, where Officer Michael Crane was ambushed and killed, while his partners sustained injuries. Post-shootout with Dorner in Corona, the police were quick to provide support to the rest of the officers who were on Dorner's list. What's weird is that Dorner has tried to justify his claims on several occasions. This is one of the texts in which Dorner wrote, "I know most of you who personally know me are in disbelief to hear from media reports that I am suspected of committing such horrendous murders and have taken drastic and shocking actions in the last couple of days. You are saying to yourself that this is completely out of character of the man you knew who always wore a smile wherever he was seen. I know I will be vilified by the LAPD and the media. Unfortunately, this is a necessary evil that I do not enjoy, but must partake in and complete for substantial change to occur within the LAPD and reclaim my name. The department has not changed since the Rampart and Rodney King days. It has gotten worse. The consent decree should never have been lifted. The only thing that has evolved from the consent decree is those officers involved in the Rampart scandal and Rodney King incidents have since been promoted to supervisor, commanders and command staff, and executive positions, indicating disappointment towards the legal system. Dorner stated, "I have exhausted all available means at obtaining my name back. I have attempted all legal court efforts within appeals at the superior courts and California appellate courts. This is my last resort. The LAPD has suppressed the truth and it has now led to deadly consequences. The LAPD's actions have cost me my law enforcement. They cost me my naval career. I lost my position as a commanding officer of a Naval Security Forces Reserve unit at Nasfallon because of the LAPD. I've lost a relationship with my mother and sister because of the LAPD. I've lost a relationship with close friends because of the LAPD. In essence, I've lost everything because the LAPD took my name and knew I was innocent." At one point, the city of Los Angeles offered a bounty of a whopping $1 million for any information that could lead them to Dorner, who was still uncaught. The search was extensive, which covered areas from San Diego to Nevada, with a significant focus on the mountainous region of Big Bear Lake, where Dorner's burned-out truck was found on February 7, 2013. The hunt reached its climax on February 12, 2013, when Dorner was spotted in the San Bernardino Mountains. He broke into a cabin and held its occupants hostage before stealing a vehicle. After being discovered by law enforcement, he abandoned the vehicle and fled to another cabin, which led to a standoff with San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies. During the exchange of gunfire, Detective Jeremiah McKay was killed, and another deputy was injured. The standoff ended when the cabin caught fire after police deployed tear gas canisters, which some reports suggested might have been pyrotechnic. Dorner was later found inside the burned cabin, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Dorner incident prompted intense scrutiny of the LAPD's practices and policies, highlighting potential issues within the department. It also raised questions about the use of force and the handling of internal grievances. The LAPD re-examined Dorner's dismissal case, although the findings remained unchanged. The manhunt and its violent conclusion left a lasting impact on the community and law enforcement agencies, where the results of unresolved disputes and the police department's management systems were being questioned. 2. Paul Razzo. It is difficult to imagine the condition of someone who has been through physical abuse or any sort of sexual violence in their life. Thankfully, the majority of the countries have now formulated strict laws and procedures to be followed against such offenders. Law enforcement officers have acted as a savior for so many people who were about to become victims of such horrendous crimes. Never did they think that one of their own would be caught under the same offense. This is the account of Paul Razzo, a 57-year-old man from Harris County, Texas, who was on trial for charges of continuous sexual abuse of a child, a severe crime that carries heavy penalties. The allegations against him were grave, which involved long-term abuse of a minor. On June 1, 2016, during the trial proceedings in a Harris County courtroom, the atmosphere was tense as testimonies and evidence were presented. As Razzo was called to the stand to testify, he became visibly agitated. In a sudden and unexpected move, Razzo lunged at a sheriff's deputy in the courtroom, where he managed to grab the officer's gun. The courtroom erupted into chaos as he attempted to gain control of the weapon. Deputies and other law enforcement personnel present quickly responded, and they engaged in a physical struggle to disarm him. Despite their efforts to subdue Razzo, he managed to fire the gun during the feud. The single shot struck Razzo, causing fatal injuries. He was immediately attended to by emergency medical personnel but succumbed to his wounds shortly thereafter. The courtroom incident was both shocking and traumatic for all those present, including court staff, attorneys, jurors, and witnesses. The incident highlighted the vulnerabilities in courtroom security and the extreme actions individuals might take when confronted with severe accusations and the prospect of long-term imprisonment. Razzo's death not only brought an abrupt and tragic end to his trial, but also sparked discussions on the adequacy of security measures in courtrooms and the psychological strain defendants can experience during high-stakes legal proceedings. The case underscored the importance of security protocols to prevent such occurrences and protect everyone involved in the judicial process. It also served as a reminder of the potential for violence, even within the confines of a court of law, where justice is sought to be administered in a controlled and safe environment. 3. Gennady Mikasevich. Breakups and relationships are subject to countless equations that can be derived from them. Cheating and not having feelings for each other are different things, but what happens when one of the partners gets involved with a third person while you are out there serving the nation? While there are humane ways to cope with this trauma as such, too bad for Gennady Mikasevich and over 30 women, who unfortunately became the victims of his boiling rage. On 14 May 1971, Gennady Mikasevich was returning to his home after serving time in the army. When he was back from service, he got to know that his supposed girlfriend married another man during his absence. This incident left him traumatized and filled with rage. On the same night, while he was on his way back from Vitebsky to Polotsk where his parents lived, it got too late to even catch a bus. Later, he claimed that he had prepared a loop for himself to hang and commit suicide as he was not able to handle the breakup. Unfortunately, he encountered a young woman on the same road that he was traveling on that night. Instead of killing himself, he decided to take his frustration out on that woman who died as a result of being strangled by Gennady. He murdered another woman through the same method in October 1971 and strangled 2 more of his victims in 1972. While he got married in 1976, the murders did not stop, and the streak continued as he began to find more and more satisfaction in killing his victims. He was unlike any other murderer and did not carry a murder weapon with him. Instead, he improvised on the spot and decided where and how to murder his victim. While it was generally in an isolated corner, there were a few of his fixed spots where he often went to commit crimes. He had a red Zaporozhets which he used to lure women towards him, manipulating them with his witty nature, while his calm demeanor made him look like any other common family man with a wife, 2 children, and a job, no one was aware of the hidden monster within him until a young investigator, Nikolai Ignatovich, came into play. Suspicions were raised around 1980, when the young detective linked all female murders to one killer instead of being the result of a gang murder. As the investigation got closer, the officers started searching for a similar red car, tracing it back to everyone who possessed a similar vehicle. Mikasevich was a member of the local party, and as a result, he too took part in the investigation of finding himself, if that makes sense. While this was of little consequence to Gennady, initially he got to know of the next steps that the investigators would take in their investigation moving forward. The year 1985 was the most traumatic of all, as Gennady took the lives of 12 innocent women who caused him no harm at all. As the investigation got closer, he started to worry more. He sent a fake letter to the local news channel trying to derail the investigation and redirect it to another direction. However, investigating officers found another letter in the same handwriting near another murder victim, and both matched. After comparing it with over 500,000 writing styles of male citizens, all evidence pointed towards Gennady. Apart from similar handwriting, more evidence was collected, which made Gennady's fears come to pass. Before arresting Gennady in 1985, many others were arrested on false accounts of murders. They were tortured, which drew false confessions out of them, and many were executed as well for crimes they did not commit. Gennady, however, was finally executed in 1987. Finally, after claiming the lives of more than 36 women, the true culprit was brought to justice. But was it even worth it by the time? This case is another testament to the fact that how corruption takes over in police departments, where everyone is caught or accused instead of the real criminal who is behind the crime. This begs people to differ on the question if we can trust the police or not. 4. The killing of Breonna Taylor. Our favorite legal buddies often run on donuts and coffee. Or so is the perception of most, thanks to basically every Hollywood movie based on cops. While this may not be true, there have been countless times when even these buddies supposed to protect us and safeguard our lives have gone rogue. This incident is not one where a cop was killed during trial, but we just couldn't leave it out. Call it special or whatever you want to, but we strongly feel that this is an incident everyone should know of. Listen to this one carefully, as it might be a lifesaver for you someday. You might want to take your notepad for this one, as this will tell you what not to do when you have an encounter with rage-filled cops. While your safety is not guaranteed, acting in a sane manner can be useful and act as a strong point to testify in court later. This is the real-life incident of Breonna Taylor. On March 13, 2020, 3 cops, Jonathan Mattingly, Brett Hankerson, and Miles Cosgrove from the LMPD Louisville Metro Police Department received a no-knock warrant for 26-year-old African-American medical worker Breonna Taylor. A no-knock warrant is a type of search warrant that allows law enforcement officers to enter a property without prior notification to the residents, such as knocking or announcing their presence. These warrants are typically issued by a judge when there is a belief that announcing their presence would lead to the destruction of evidence, the escape of suspects, or pose a danger to the officers or others. The use of no-knock warrants has been controversial, with critics arguing that they can lead to violent confrontations and unintended harm to innocent individuals. The cops suspected Taylor of selling controlled substances, which were received in the form of packages at her place, in an apartment at 3003 Springfield Drive in Louisville. Now, there is some controversy surrounding this warrant as well, but we will get into that later. Just after midnight on the same day the 3 cops mentioned, dressed in plain clothes and armed, reached Taylor's residence. Another controversial opinion is whether they announced themselves before entering the residence as police officers. There are varied opinions on that, which we will take up further in the case. While the neighbors claim that they heard one of the officers announce themselves and knock 3 times on the door before entering, Taylor and his boyfriend claim that they did not hear anyone do that. Oh, by the way, spoiler alert, Taylor was with her boyfriend at the time in her apartment when the police arrived. Taylor's boyfriend's name is Kenneth Walker, was armed as well. Despite Taylor and Walker asking multiple times, the policemen did not identify themselves before forcing entry through the door with the help of a battle aram. Walker obviously got hesitant at the time and immediately called his mother, who called 911. Not knowing the nature of the situation, Walker saw fit to fire a warning shot. This warning shot would turn out to be the biggest mistake he would ever make. The warning shot, which was intended to make the police officers back off, injured Mattingly in the leg. What followed was 32 rounds being fired by the police officers, which ended up killing Taylor as she was shot 6 times. Walker was behind Taylor, so he was unharmed. This sparked a controversy related to several issues, and the case was taken up in court as its nature was of paramount importance. Apart from how the police officers behaved on the scene and what it resulted in, the the public was stuck on the fact of 3 white officers gunning down a black woman. If this statement alone is not enough to make you understand the nature of this case, we don't know what is. A few facts that have come out since the case hit the media are that Taylor's home was never searched after all. One of the officers, Hankinson, shot 10 bullets into the window of Taylor's apartment. Walker was charged with assault of a police officer, but the charges were later dismissed with prejudice. Now let's cover the broad spectrum of investigations that followed after this incident. It is safe to say that there were state-level and federal-level investigations for the officers, not only the ones who shot Taylor but also for those who were involved in this homicide. On May 20th, 2020, the investigation's findings were given to Daniel Cameron, Attorney General of Kentucky, to determine whether any officer should be criminally charged. Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher also asked the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office to review the findings. Taylor's autopsy report stated clearly that her death was to be considered as a homicide, which was the result of gunshot wounds. The investigations concluded Officer Hankinson to be removed from the LMPD board in departmental disciplinary matters. He was accused of violating departmental policies, which included using blunt force by blindly firing into Taylor's apartment without the immediate notice of the inhabitants of the apartment being a threat to the police officers. The LMPD detective Joshua C. James was the one who approved the warrant on the preceding day of the incident. All 5 warrants were similar, indicating justification for no-knock entry due to the nature of how these drug traffickers operate. Christopher Slobogin, director of Vanderbilt University's criminal justice program, mentions that unless the police had a reason to suspect drugs being stashed at Taylor's house and that her residence had surveillance cameras installed, a no-knock warrant would be improper. The New York Times interviewed roughly a dozen neighbors and reported that only one of them, who was on the exterior staircase immediately above Taylor's apartment, heard the officers shout police once and knock at least 3 times, while the other interviewed neighbors heard no announcement, including one who was outside smoking a cigarette. This scenario sparked a widespread public controversy and attracted significant media attention as well. As Black Lives Matter was on the rise, the public outcry demanded justice for Taylor and a systematic change in police procedures and how they carried out these operations. The slogan "Say Her Name" was on a high rise, which denoted the violence a black woman had to face because of white police officers. In response to the public's outcry, Louisville enacted Breonna's Law in 2020, which banned no-knock warrants and required officers to wear body cameras while investigating and serving warrants. The fact that the officers wore body cameras was also taken into consideration during judicial trials. While it is believed that one of the officers had a live body camera which showcases his gun being held off, it is not confirmed whether other body cameras were live or not. Breonna's case is just one of the examples of how there is a lack of trust between law enforcement and the public. It also serves as a reminder as to how, if these policies are not kept in check, they can come back to bite the judicial system. Was it the leniency of the detective who approved a no-knock warrant to be served? Or was it the unlawful actions of the police officers that led to such a tragic incident? While there have been countless reforms to end racial discrimination amongst blacks and whites, there is still scope for improvement, and this incident just highlights that clearly and concisely. 5. Theodore Dyer. His story is slightly different than the ones we have covered previously in this video. The thing is that he had a streak of crime since he was born. As amusing as it would be to imagine a 1-year-old killing someone with a butter knife, it was not that. Let's talk about what it actually was, shall we? Theodore's criminal record drew massive amounts of attention because of the sheer brutality he displayed. Dyer had a troubled childhood growing up, as he had a run-in with law enforcement frequently. By the time he was a teenager, he was more involved with an organized crime network, which often included armed conflicts and drug trafficking, big-scale operations. By 1990, he became the leader of a violent gang, who were responsible for carrying out violent crimes, which included high-profile heists and confrontations with law enforcement. His streak of crime accumulated into a massive bank robbery, which was his biggest gig yet in 2001. Dyer and his buddies took hostage civilians inside the bank, which resulted in a shootout with the police officers on the scene. Unfortunately, many police officers and civilians were shot at the scene, which resulted in injuries, as Dyer planned to escape in a car. After that, he tried to flee from there but was ultimately captured after sustaining serious injuries and eventually surrendering. One of the most watched legal trials commenced in 2002, and it was overwhelming, to say the least. The prosecution bombarded the judge with evidence such as public witnesses, DNA samples, and the amount of damage that the gang, including Theodore, had caused. What cannot be ruled out is the fact that his crime streak from a long point of time was stressed as well, while the defense made attempts to defend their client, because that is what they do by pointing out his troubled upbringing and psychological trauma. It did not go well, to say the least. If this was not enough, there were major security issues when it came to Dyer and his gang, thanks to multiple attempts they have made to flee from court and custody. Keeping this in mind, extra security personnel were appointed at the scene, and Dyer himself was often brought in a heavily guarded convoy. There were absolutely no loose ends, and law enforcement did not want to let this monster loose so that he could go on a rampage again. On November 18, 2002, the courtroom was packed with journalists, advocates, and the crowd who were eager to know the outcome of this trial. He then revealed a concealed weapon and started firing random shots in the room, leaving officers and civilians injured. When security personnel released him of his gun, he was severely damaged and died on the spot. This case forces our minds to ponder over the fact that how many risks are involved when it comes to the trials of big league criminals like Theodore Dyer. If only he had behaved himself, so much could have been avoided. 6. Theodore Dyer 2. D. What does a person who acted as a friendly neighbor at first, but then goes on to molest the neighbor's daughter, deserve? Punishment, death penalty, torture, or something else? Well, in Theodore's case, he was strangled in prison by another convict who was serving a life sentence just like him. Was it an act intended to provide justice to the girl who was molested by Theodore, or was it a stupid mistake that came back to bite him? More on that later, but for now, let us understand what happened. Theodore was often known for his calm and friendly demeanor. Similar was his reaction to the next-door neighbor Mary and her 9-year-old daughter. However, Mary wasn't aware of the monster that was hiding within Theodore, waiting to pounce on her daughter. In June 2013, the 9-year-old was at Dyer's apartment as he developed a bond with her. When Mary decided that it was time for her daughter to come back, she visited Dyer's place. An eerie sensation stopped her from knocking at the door and just entering. One thing she would not regret doing: moving on. When Mary entered the bedroom, she found Theodore trying to take advantage of an innocent 9-year-old girl. Thankfully, Mary's instincts kicked in at the right time, and she grabbed her daughter as soon as she could and ran away. She reported him to the authorities, and he was taken into police custody. Further investigation revealed shocking facts, such as that Mary's daughter was assaulted on 3 different occasions, while she had no information of the incident taking place. He was charged with an illicit crime towards the child and sentenced to prison for the same. There he was placed with another criminal who was serving a life sentence. His name was Stephen Sanderson. He became the ultimate doom of Theodore, as he was strangled by Stephen, resulting in his death. Now let us explore what Stephen and Peter Brian Barry, an associate professor of philosophy and the author of Evil and Moral Psychology, have to say about it. Barry points out the distinction between an evil doer and a child molester, and what society thinks about these terms in general. Most of us can think of some circumstances where killing another human being is justified. It's much harder, maybe even impossible, to think of circumstances where child molestation is justifiable. There might be something so remarkably heinous about that crime that's eliciting these kind of reactions. And frankly, that's not crazy. If you make a list about the most terrible things we can do to each other, is there something besides that's going to be on the top of the list? Barry strongly believes that the fate of a criminal should not be decided by another criminal in the first place. As gruesome as the crime was, which Dyer committed, this was not the way his sentence should have ended. To this conversation, he adds that if the Michigan Police Department laid out a rule that anyone who tries to commit such an act again would receive a death sentence, what would people like Stephen do? Would the fear of receiving a death sentence control them from doing such acts? Or they would do it anyway, just to vent out their anger? Stephen, on the other hand, claims proudly that the child molester Ted got what he deserved. 12 hours after the death of Dyer, Stephen confessed to unaliving him by strangulation with his own shoelace. He admitted this crime to 2 detectives, Gary Thomas and Patrick Darrow. 51-year-old Stephen was already serving a life sentence for murdering his girlfriend in Wayne in 1991. He told Thomas and Darrow more about the crime he did, as compared to what he confessed in the court of law. As per Stephen, he killed Dyer because he deserved it. In a video recording of Sanderson's confession obtained by the Saginaw News, Sanderson answered the detectives' questions for about 35 minutes. His answers provided the detectives with more understanding of his thought process on the night of August 28 and the morning of August 29. Sanderson told the detectives Dyer, who was serving a 25-year minimum sentence for first-degree criminal sexual conduct against someone under the age of 13, deserved to not be alive. Stephen told the detectives, "I do what's necessary. I do what some people won't. I mean, you guys are cops. You arrest people all the time for stuff for which you wish you could shoot in the face. I already know that I'm not stupid. There's crimes that shouldn't be committed, so. I just have, I don't know, I just don't have any empathy for people." Thomas then asked a follow-up question. "So, basically what you did, you figured Ted got what he deserved," Thomas said. "Ted got what he deserved," Sanderson said. "I believe that with all of my heart." Which of these cop-turned-criminal stories did you find the most bizarre out of all? There are certain things that one must keep in mind when reading about such incidents. The fact is that no one is born with a criminal mindset. Many fail to understand it from a psychological perspective. There is no denying the fact that what these criminals did was unforgivable, and they deserve punishment, and justice should be brought to the ones who suffered because of them. However, one must consider that many of these have had troubled childhoods or relationships, or have been through some experience that destroyed them from the inside. Their experience left an emotional and mental scar within their system, which compelled them to walk the path they did. Again, this is no excuse for the crimes they committed, but if someone had tried to understand what they were going through and why they did all of that in the first place, things might have turned out better. But the same is not the case for everyone. Unlike Jordan, who was driven by revenge in opposition to racial discrimination, he suffered. Whereas Stephen, on the other hand, saw fit to put an end to Dyer as he deemed fit. That's all for today. If you liked this video, feel free to drop a like and keep the conversation going in the comment section. Click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on interesting content similar to this.